Bhavantu Savano Bhunaktu Saraviryam Karavavahe Tejasvinamadittamastu Ma Vivishavai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thanks. I had the best gurus of an entire generation, in my generation. I was unbelievably blessed, and frankly, I have no idea why. Rudy was, well, some of you know, but Rudy was unbelievable. And to be around him was astonishing. I rolled in out of Indiana and into his shop, and without ever asking a question, he accepted me. And I went on to have with him, I met people like Patrick Moynihan and Julie Christie. I met everybody on Broadway. I met everybody in Hollywood that he knew, which was many people. I met lots of politicians. I met so many people. It opened my life in so many ways. And then meeting Baba was also, he was unbelievable. He was an astonishing person. His presence was filled with bliss. He was, in my experience, the best person in India in his age. I spent 6 years with Ananda Maima at Uttarkashi during Diwali every year. She too was just like waves of radiance flowing off of her. Astonishing. I knew Satya Sai Baba, blah, anyway, blah, blah, blah. And the reason I'm telling you that is because I walked in the room and looked at the statues in the picture and just had to tell that to you. In an age where there's so much noise in the spiritual world and so much judgmentalism, it's really important to be clear about what your purpose is and to stay focused on your purpose. Because ultimately, I was blessed with great teachers. But every one of the people that I met, somebody has some, or more than somebody, has some big complaint about. The thing is this, ultimately, what really matters is not the character of your teacher. What really matters is your own character and the quality of student that you are. That's what matters. The rest of it's bullshit. So, I tried to be a good student, but I have a confession to make. You know this about me, right? You know I have a confession to make. My confession is I hate lists. I hate lists. I find lists just so off-putting. lists like lists of yamas and lists of niyamas and lists of elements and lists of qualities of process and lists of goddesses and lists of tattvas and lists of everything drives me crazy. And the reason it does is because, well, cosmologically, we are informed that we exist in a non-dual reality. Interpersonally, we're told, well, not so much. This isn't in Sanskrit, I'll just transliterate it for you. The goddess is love. And so, what are all these lists? They're just like, they drive me crazy with confusion. What is all this stuff? You know, I start reading this material and I'm planning it for you and I'm thinking, what about this and this list and that list? And I just come to a place where I just go, I hate lists. And it sucks all the life out of the transmission that we are attempting to share with you. Because what is really important is the goddess is alive, and we're here attempting to understand how to connect to that liveness that will transform us and transform our life. So I thought of a simple way to explain it to you. A simple way that might encompass all the lists. First of all, I wanted to say, if you look at the Sri Chakra from a profile, look at the profile of a Sri Chakra, there are lots of different shapes of them, but essentially it's a triangle. Every time I see a triangle, I think respiratory process. Now, to make that a little simpler, I don't know if you read my resume, but I was born in Kentucky, so y'all know that I can talk that lingo if I want. Anyway, so in Kentucky they have a simple understanding. If it breathes, it's alive. And if it ain't, it's dead. And the thing we know is that living doesn't come from dead. Living comes from life. Living comes from alive. And when I see the profile of my Sri Chakra when I sit down in my puja room in the morning, it reminds me that the entire universe is alive. Is alive. There's nothing in this universe that isn't alive. So if I look at all the lists, I start slinging lists at you, and you're trying to take in all this information, which that's very admirable. I have to tell you, I shouldn't be confessing, You know that I have never, ever memorized the lists of tattvas. Never. I refused. I looked at that list, I said to myself, quietly, fuck this. I did. Because for us, as sadhakas, as people who are concerned about, growing and ultimately knowing, the substance, the essence of our own lives and life itself. It is really the most important thing is to hold the big picture in perspective. And what the hell, if I'm giving you a whole bunch of lists, I'm making you hack your way through a bunch of jungle to get to some place which 20 years from now you will think, well, that guy was either stupid or cruel. I won't defend my intelligence. I don't know, but I'm definitely not cruel. So, this entire universe is alive. Think of it like this. My room is just across from, my bedroom is just across from the tent down in the yard. So when I get up in the morning, I open the blinds and there's that big oak tree there, which is just a fabulous tree, I have to say. And I'm so grateful every morning to look out that window and see that tree in all of its different seasons. It's wonderful. Lori has been with me for like 30 years. She has struggles with some nervous system issues. She just won a regional award for the best novel last year, and bravo to you. She's a mystery writer. That's amazing. So, pardon my digression. I look at that tree, and especially my favorite time of year is the autumn, because that's when the acorns start falling off, and it just sounds like, somebody's out there playing a piano on the bricks out there. Every acorn hits a different brick, which makes a different sound. It reminds me of Pharoah Sanders, a saxophone player, a very out there saxophone player. So, one of those acorns, a singularity, landed in the proper place, begins to unfold in a set of stages. And from that acorn, through various stages, with various process speeds, as an effect of the various elements that are at play there and the ways in which they play, the tree explodes forth. It goes from this, increasingly it unfolds and reveals its treeness, in this case, oak treeness. And to look at the acorn, of course, we've seen a billion acorns and we take it all very for granted. But to really look at that, to pay attention to it, it's unbelievable how this thing became that. I think another thing for us as, humans in the 20th century, especially living in the United States, is that we've lost complete contact with nature. We've lost contact with it. We can have any food we want any time of year we want it. When I was a kid, living in Kentucky, the only thing that was year-round was the bourbon my relatives cooked. I remember this old 1949 panel truck that the farmer who was the father of my mother's roommate in her nursing school used to deliver vegetables to us in the summertime, and milk, and butter, and eggs. And in the fall, he would deliver apples and pears, which we went to the backyard and wrapped, and then put in barrels in the basement. And that's no bullshit. And then later on, we wrapped the potatoes and the turnips and the cabbages and put those in the basement. You know, and my grandmother had a big chicken house, so every Sunday when we went to her house to have chicken, she would kill an extra chicken and give it to my mom, and we'd bring it home. And so, you know, the foods that we ate were reflective of the seasons that we were passing through. You know, now we go to the store, we have mangoes and grapefruit, and, you know, there's strawberries any time of year. I mean, strawberries in Kentucky in those days happened between, you know, the middle of June and the 4th of July, and that was it. And that was it. We've lost touch with our world. You know, and so we walk through it with looking at our cell phones, not paying attention to what's going on around us, the miracle of life that is exploding everywhere around us all the time. I should explain to some of you who probably may not know that when I talk about tattvas that I refuse to memorize, tattvas are a list of stages in the evolution of the relationship of Shiva and Shakti that ends up expressing the entire world. There are 36 tattvas. When you look at a Sri Chakra, I tell you what, you guys are all, one of the things I have always prided myself about, and frankly always admired my dear friend Sally Kempton for, is that she and I both have the most amazing, brilliant students. She has a more distant relationship with her students. I live with all of mine. I live with all of mine because I lived with my guru, Rudy, and I felt like living with my guru, Rudy, experiencing him as a human being, and seeing in him the unbelievable, miraculous stuff that used to happen, that he did, and that used to happen around him, helped me very much to accept the fact that I too am a human being. And accepting my own humanity, you know, made it possible for me to completely embrace and absorb Rudy's spiritual energy and stand in the space that I was called to stand in when he passed away. Otherwise, you know, he would have been up there, I would have been down here, and the connection between that space and me was, you know, insurmountable. And I'd end up walking away feeling horrible about myself. The point of this practice is to walk away feeling a little more each day in contact with your own divinity. And frankly, I'm not here to empower anybody. I'm not here to empower me. I'm not here to empower you. I am, because that empowering is simply going to put you in a position where you accumulate a lot more crap. Truly. I am here with you, connecting to that divinity, you know, connecting to that love, to dissolve every kind of crap and every egotism and establish ourselves in the experience of our own divinity, which completely and totally transcends this world. And thank God for that, because we're living in a frigging funny farm. as goddess worshipers. We are witnesses and participants in this extraordinary process in which an acorn becomes a tree, in which, I love this word, zygote becomes a human being. I walk around saying that word to myself sometimes, just because it's one of those words, it's like perspicacity is another word. You just want to there are some words that you just want to say because it feels amazing to say it. So, we are witnesses and participants in a process which is profound, which is divine. This process in which, from a simple seed, unfolds as pure aliveness, expressed as awareness and respiratory process. You can't break down the two things. They don't separate from one another. There is this extraordinary intimacy that exists between awareness and breath. That right this very moment, as we access our breath, allows us to access a cosmic process expressed in this moment as us. And, as we access it more and more and more and more, it is revealed as a process which transcends time and space. If you need empowerment, you probably want to run for office. And I wish you the best in that endeavor. Really, I do. We need some decent people in office. But, I'm not headed for any office. I'm headed home. I'm headed to that space of unconditional love that accepts and embraces and nourishes all livingness. When we look at a Sri Chakra, when I look at a Sri Chakra, what I see from the point down to the squares is that oak tree expressed as my life, and that oak tree expressed, that Sri Chakra expressed as livingness itself, which is this entire world, which is vaster and vaster than we can imagine. And it's so interesting to me that in quantum gravity theory, and there's a book I'd recommend you to read if you have any interest in the subject at all, and it's written by Carlo Rovelli, and it's called Reality is Not What It Seems. There's another book that's pretty okay. It's interesting reading, accessible, etc., called The Quantum Enigma. You could read that too. But Carlo Rovelli's book is cutting edge. He talks about a fundamental reality that is one-dimensional. One-dimensional. From this one-dimensional reality, which is a huge but not infinite, that's important. Because if it's huge but not infinite, that means that it condenses into an acorn. It doesn't condense into nothing. It's not an infinitely huge or infinitely small anything. It's a big number, but it's a finite number of magnetic loops that are described mathematically without a t in the equation. That t being time. There's no time involved. These loops are, or at least appear to be, mathematically, and this works within the whole scheme of Einstein's relativity theory and quantum mechanics and Newton's, classical physics. These very, very, very tiny magnetic resonances, which speak to us of the notion of spanda. Who wants to try saying spanda the way Sally Kempton says spanda? Doesn't she say spanda in a completely unique way? She says spanda like nobody I know. Because, of course, she's from New Jersey and New York, and I'm from Kentucky where we say sponda. She says, spanda carikas, and I say spanda carikas. Y'all. These magnetic resonances, spanda. The amazing thing is, within this theoretical framework, which was worked out a while ago by a guy named John Wheeler, who helped Oppenheimer make the bomb, and went around and ended up at the University of Texas and was responsible for really compelling, quantum theorists to deal with the issue of consciousness when he wrote a book called Anthropomorphic World. I mean, he's saying, isn't it amazing that everything works out perfectly for us in this universe? That is something to question. When these loops, these tiny loops, come into connection with one another, these one-dimensional loops, they're flat. When they come into connection with each other, space takes on volume. They come out, three-dimensionality comes from that. Space awakens. And Roger Penrose, who was Stephen Hawking's colleague at Cambridge and is a very brilliant mathematician. I don't think you get a job in Cambridge unless you're that. Roger Penrose has written a book in which he describes the shape of space as it unfolds from the interaction of these magnetic loops. And the shape of space is a vortex. Take a triangle and turn it upside down. What do you have? You have a vortex. You have the shape of a vortex. And so, looking at a Sri Chakra, I can see the sprout in an oak tree that is passing all of the dynamics of it as it passes through its stages and unfolds its leaves and spreads itself in front of the sun to capture the energy which it enfolds into itself as it withdraws its life into the earth, to take up new minerals. Where do the minerals that a tree feeds on comes from after a while? Say, you know, that oak tree is 100 and some odd, it's at least 120 some years old. This house has been here 120 years. Well, the minerals that the tree is uptaking are the minerals of the leaves that were present at its roots 100 years ago. Or, you know, it doesn't take that long for a leaf to decompose. Last year. And what you have is this cycling of life happening. The leaves that fall from the tree, you know, decompose, and all of their nutrients are reabsorbed into the tree and re-expressed again as the rebirth of the leaves. And what we see in ourselves, in our own lives, in the cycles of our own human existence, is the tree of life, which is the singular, the one, this is theoretical, and it's mine, the one life that is the life of the earth. There's only one life on earth, according to me. This is what the goddess told me in Kamakya. There's one life on earth, and it's her. It's not me. You know, most of us think, me, 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 me. We should think, you. The one life that is the life of the earth. And we ourselves, and the trees, and the roses, and the grass, and the birds, and the snakes, and the animals, are all the various creatures that are the effects. All of us. I am not a singular life. I am an effect of a singular life. And when this body falls down, its elements, its minerals will go back into the soil and become the source of an entirely new life. And when the bindu of a male and the bindu of a female come together in connection, the space that unfolds from that contact becomes the physical life of a child, which then grows up to become you and me. And when the bindu of a sincere person and the bindu of an accomplished teacher come together, the space that is awakened, that unfolds, is the space of a transformed and mature spiritual being and an unimaginable possibility as a life form. And maybe it happens in 36 stages of the tattvas. I mean, the thing about the tattvas is it's a brilliant idea. It's brilliant. And my admiration for the non-dual Shaivas is, you know, supreme. But the boundaries between tattvas is completely arbitrary, let's face it. And we have very much more sophisticated, I mean, the one thing modern people have done, which is really unbelievably amazing, is we make great measuring devices. We make the best measuring devices ever made, maybe, you know, at least in our solar system. And so we, while, you know, what we can say from our understanding of quantum mechanics is, quantum physics, is we have no idea where the boundaries are until we attempt to measure them. And until we measure them, there are no boundaries. And then when we measure them, we will cause boundaries to happen. The very process of measuring creates boundaries. Let me ask you something. What does that tell us about our lists? like the Ten Commandments, or the yamas and the niyamas, or, you know, the Girl Scout pledge. On my honor, I will do my best to do my duty to God and my... All right. I was a Boy Scout, can you believe it? I was. I was an altar boy. I was a lifeguard. It tells us that all of these lists are completely arbitrary. It tells us that first and foremost, we have to be connected to and accept ourselves and pay careful attention to the boundaries that we allow unconsciously to be established as the form of our life, because as a reaction to the pain that we experience from contact with strong energies. As Rudy said in his book called, that he was talking about consuming the body and blood. Didn't work. I think she got hung up on the language. Taking in strong energy. Rudy used to say, life has to be consumed whole, with all its pain and its disappointment and its joy. And it's only in consuming life whole that we are able to find the strength within ourselves to rise above the disappointments of our ancestors. I look at that Sri Chakra and I see all of those triangles, and I think about, vortexes having different spins, unfolding themselves, connecting and connecting and connecting and connecting. Some canceling others, but still a few remaining to unfold the space that we exist in. And then what we understand is that space itself is fully alive and aware. Space is not empty. On this topic, there is a book called A Universe from Nothing by Lawrence Krauss. It will be interesting to you if, you have if this kind of discussion is in any way meaningful. Space is not empty. Space is absolutely full. And this is also Einstein's relativity theory. Space is full. And the amazing thing is space is also granular, it turns out, like grains of sand. And what holds space together and gives it the appearance of, a screen upon which the whole universe can unfold is all these little, like protrusions that develop on the grains of space, which connect space to each other, connects grains of space to one another. It turns out that particles like gluons and muons and particles grow as protrusions on these granules of space and bind space together. so that it becomes a fabric. And this fabric of granules, some of it canceling out others, but still enduring as, in its form, accumulates. Because somehow the rule in the universe, embodied in the Sri Chakra in the form of the Bindu and the central triangle, embodied in the notion of Kameshvara and Kameshvari, the goddess and the god of desire, is that in the universe there is this fundamental principle of attraction. Particles aggregate. Space aggregates, Sally and I have this mutual friend who actually has come to live here. He's a scholar in residence. His name is Mark Gaffney. He's, an extraordinary guy with a very bad reputation. I don't know. His ability to attract trouble is like mind-boggling to me. And I'm number 2 on the list of people who have this magnificent capacity to attract trouble. Don't ever try to be real. Mark talks about an intimate universe, and he talks about the Kabbalah as having the fundamental notion of that it is an intimate universe. This notion in the Kabbalah is equally present in Sri Vidya and in all of Shakta Shaivism, that whatever form Shiva and Shakti have this profound intimacy. Breath and awareness are profoundly intimate, and the effect of that intimacy is beauty. And the experience of that beauty is joy. And, the joy overflows throughout all of the dimensions of the formative world into pleasure and to pain. It is our fundamental confusion about pleasure and pain that causes us to create boundaries, to defend ourselves from one thing as we reach out for another, not understanding that all of it is the blessing of the goddess which we are called to internalize. Just as a tree takes in every day and every aspect of its environment into itself, and from that it makes its best effort to expand. The living universe is expressed in our puja rooms as a Sri Chakra. It is the goddess that is the breath of life. When I started practicing yoga, God, I hate to tell you how long ago that was. I started practicing yoga in 1968. Is that 51 years ago? Whoa. Dang. Guess I stayed in that downward dog a little too long. Forgot to look up. 51 years ago. It really took me about 3 yoga classes I had to be dragged to. But finally, I had an experience that just hit me in the head. For the first time in my life, I felt good. I felt good. Wow. I felt good. I couldn't believe it. I'd been feeling really bad for a while. I felt really bad about the way African American people are treated in this country, and I felt really bad about how girls are getting treated in this country. You know, I felt bad about the Vietnam War and how we were treating everybody else in the world. I felt heartbroken over poverty. I mean, I was kind of, drove myself crazy looking at what we said about ourselves and what we actually were, you know. Land of the free, home of the brave? Oops, I don't think so. I felt really bad about it. Discovering yoga finally released me from that experience, and I felt good. For the first time in my life, I felt what it felt like to breathe. What's it feel like to breathe? It feels really good. Holy shit. If that's how simple it is, it's unbelievable. I remember, you know, before I met Rudy, living in Bloomington, Indiana, stepping out of a bunch of misery and getting up early in the morning after my asana practice, which went on for about 4 hours every morning, and going for a walk through the campus. So I lived on one side of campus to the town where I would collect my donut breakfast. Can't take the donuts away from a Kentucky boy, can you? Well, we have, but by now, but we hadn't yet at that point. And I remember walking through the park and feeling my breath and feeling so good I had to sit down. And when I sat up again, it was dark. Whoa. Feeling how good it feels to breathe can have it's that simple. That simplicity can take you to a whole nother dimension of your life. So we understand that boundaries are imaginary and only happen really when we look for them. And we look for them because we hurt and we're informed that pain is a manifestation of a problem. And if there's a problem, we, the very brilliant, most brilliant culture ever to exist in the world, knows if there's a problem, then we can solve it. And so we go find a solution. Well, I was really lucky, and I know I'm veering further and further off track. I was really lucky to have studied with Jay Forrester at MIT for a while. Jay Forrester was a guy who invented radar and a few other things, and then established a department at MIT called System Dynamics. And one of the simple things about system dynamics is you understand that the solution to every problem is the beginning of the next problem, and that problems are infinite. And so within the context of our lives and our sadhana, it is completely inappropriate for us to establish and defend boundaries which have, only the effect of limiting the natural processes that are at work in our life to unfold our highest potential. If you look at that oak tree out there and you look at the bark, how many times has that bark been broken and shattered? Some of it, of course, had something to do with the storm that came through, or maybe the lack of attention that it experienced at some point in his life. But the bulk of the breakage in the trunk of that tree is, has happened from the life process that is going on within it, which has caused it to expand and break its own shell 1,000,000 times. And most of the pain that we experience in our own lives, which we are reacting to, trying to solve, getting analyzed over, taking a bunch of, antidepressants for, is stupid. It is the natural expansion of the goddess that we have prayed for ourselves, expressing itself as the change in the form of our life, which will facilitate a deeper and finer expression of the grace of that goddess through the entire field of our experience. To keep it, so I'm going to roll back again, to keep it very simple, the reason that we are doing this Sri Chakra practice, the reason we're looking at the Sri Chakra, the reason we sit in front of it, the reason we allow it to remind us of the extraordinary, unbelievable, unimaginable potential present in the form of that little dot at the top of the chakra, which unfolds itself as this whole glorious expression. The reason that we sit there is to find that same gloriousness, that same profoundly good feeling within ourselves, and to hold that feeling as we move through our days. And to be undistracted from that feeling by all of the changes that are absolutely going to happen as an effect of the experience of that goodness that's going on inside us. And I guarantee you, if you're feeling that good, you're probably going to end up pissing off half the people you know. So you better train yourself to hold your focus pretty tightly. What do you mean you're feeling good? This is a disaster. We need to freak out. So, last night in class, we worked to establish the experience of connection and transmission. And in our daily lives, however you go about this, I feel a connection with every human being I encounter in my life. Even you. We feel this interconnectedness breathing in us. We experience this life force, this life energy. And if we can dissolve those defensive routines and compensation mechanisms that are established in our individual physical bodies and in our psyche, and I'll talk about that in a bit, to take this energy, absorb it, and allow it to flow in us, we grow and grow until the interconnectedness that we see. First, we think we're all individuals. In America, individuals compete because it's healthy. Not for the individuals, well, for a few individuals it is. We compete because capitalism is based on competition. right? And evolution, oh, that's a whole, that's where we get to with competition is about evolution. Well, here's another interesting story. When we hear the word evolution, we think about, well, evolution is refinement and ever increasingly appropriate adaptation by organisms to their environments. And slowly, progressively, things get better. Right? That's evolution. We solve problems. Problems are solved on the most basic levels, and we just keep getting better and better. It turns out that, in the mid-70s, there was there's a third life form on Earth besides plants and animals. They're called archaea, and they're single-celled organisms, which one of the fun things that they love to do, just to drive plants and animals crazy, is they take genetic material from plants and animals and move it horizontally across species, every moment of every day. And so what that means is that we're living in a cauldron of change, which is unbelievably random, but it's this vibrant, percolating, boiling, biological phenomenon going on that has its own structures that have nothing to do with the way we see the world. She is acting according to her own will and playing the way she wants, and it has nothing to do with us. We are simply effects of that play. And, so it's nice if we stop bitching and complaining and appreciate the opportunity that we have to experience the deliciousness of breathing, which is the deliciousness of breath is her beauty. It is her beauty. So, I sit in front of a Sri Chakra and I am opening my heart every day. Now, I am opening my heart to that indwelling goddess whose form in the Sri Chakra is reminding me of the aliveness of my total environment. Dissolving all of my mental complexities, taking away all of my agendas, and just establishing my awareness in my own self, in the joy of of respiratory process, and allowing my life to show me its way. When I was in Bloomington, Indiana, before I met Rudy, I had established a spiritual community called the Sufi House with some friends of mine who were disciples of Vilayat Khan at the time. And I taught yoga there, and they did Sufi dancing. This was in 1970. And we had, like 35 people there. And I made breakfast every morning and was responsible for the yogurt, which I made in a big 5-gallon pot once a week. And we carried on a practice there until Rudy basically sent for me. He called me, and I went. I never expected to meet, I lived in Indiana, for God's sakes. I'd hardly been out of Indiana, Kentucky, and Ohio. And the only reason I ever went to Ohio was because you could drink 3-2 beer there. I drank a lot of beer when I was 18. landing in New York was an unimaginable possibility. Rudy dying 2 years later was an even bigger unimaginable possibility. Going to India and being called by Baba was still another head spinner, etc., and so forth and so on. In my life, though I did have at some point early on a vision for this place, there was no possibility that where I was then was connected in any way to where I am now. It was an unfolding that I could not in any way possibly contrive. And so, forget about all your contrivances. Just drop it. I sit in front of my Sri Chakra to open my heart and find my connection first to myself in the form of Ganesha. Ganesha in the Sri Vidya practice is ahamkara. Ahamkara is the I awareness. Ahamkara. I awareness. I awareness is the body and the mind. Now, as Catholics, we were taught that the body is one thing and the mind is another thing, and the body is where all the sin happens, and the mind is what needs to be like handled tightly controlled in order to make sure that it doesn't get confused by all the shit the body's asking for and goes off and does some sin. And if it does get confused, then you get to go to hell for a long, long time. Right? It's amazing to me how much of that stuff permeates American culture. It blows my mind. You know. And of course, I being ever, this is another great word, obstreperous. I just, when they laid that bullshit on me, I just pushed it right back. Ahamkara. There was, a number of years ago, a book that came out by, I think it was Jeffrey Sachs, A Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. What? Okay, Oliver Sacks, thank you. A man who mistook his wife for a hat. And the title is about a story of a guy who had a metal rod go through his head and he survived. But he was a little bit confused at times. But he was still perfectly autonomous in many ways. You know, the story that's told in the book is the demonstration of the proof that the body and the mind are not two things. The body and the mind are one thing. The body and the mind are one mechanism. The body and the mind are together and need to be in harmony with one another, not at odds. And here we are this, by golly, we are this vortex. We are this spiral of energies, this energetic mechanism, which in its most basic form, the body-mind, is called ahamkara. In this puja, the first thing that we honor is Ganesha, and we honor Ganesha as our own body-mind. The fusion of Shiva and Shakti has produced Ganesha, who is the very, embodiment of perseverance. We worship Ganesha. There's a mantra that we will do that I'll give you, I'll share with you. and there is an offering that we make. But that sequence in the external ritual is about connecting to our bodies and finding our breath. That's the first thing I do when I sit down to do my puja. I sit down and I feel my body. And I find my breath. And the second thing I do then, let's see, is I honor my gurus and I find my connection. I find within myself the presence of my gurus that endures there. And I am grateful. And I really am grateful. I really am. The third thing I do is find the breath of life within myself. The breath of life, well, when I met Rudy, I have to say, I looked at Rudy. I walked in his store and I looked at Rudy. I looked at him. And Rudy looked at me and my heart fucking exploded. Just went ka-splowy. And I heard it. It wasn't like it exploded all at once. First I heard it start to crack. I felt it cracking. I felt this crack and crunch and crackling, and then it went kablam, and tears just went bang out of my face. And I had this whole, my knees turned to jelly and my head was swimming, and this energy, his energy, went right into me and just, come on. I experienced his, dare I say, Shakti. I don't use that word much, I really don't. First of all, it's difficult to talk about because what is that? Anyway, we'll talk some more. I felt that. And I can find that, even though it doesn't exactly blow me apart anymore, I can find that again and again, and as I find it, genuine gratitude comes forward, and going deeply into that gratitude by holding my awareness of my breath and what it feels like to breathe, I can begin to experience the threefold respiratory process that is fundamental in me. Meeting Rudy, and the 2 years that I spent with him, Rudy was just a genius about energy. Rudy had no interest in Hindu anything. He was he had Nityananda as a guru, so he was a little bit, he'd met lots of sadhus in India and he was a little bit suspect, and he'd met lots of Americans by then who, talked a lot and changed their clothes and did a lot of different things, but who really weren't really walking the walk. And Rudy was all about energy. And I learned about energy from Rudy. And I experienced that connection. And I experienced from that one connection, it opened up for me a vision and a palpable awareness of the interconnectedness of myself and entire city. I once, when I first moved to Boston, was sitting in my room trying to feel my connectedness in Boston. This was in 1982. I almost, literally and truly, I almost died. I was extending my awareness along these energy lines so far that I just forgot my body. And of course, those of you who know Teresa know how she freaks out when something happens to me like that. I have Teresa pounding on my chest and jumping on my bed, trying to get me back. I didn't do that again. I didn't feel I was pretty hungover after that, by the way. Boston is not a happy place. We were talking about that yesterday. Where I want to get to with all of this is finding that connectedness, we hold it, and the process, that experience of holding that connectedness is called, what's it called? Devotion. It's called devotion. It's that simple. It's called devotion. The essence of self-realization, which is the purpose of this whole process, is to cultivate devotion. Not to me, not to Sally, not to anybody. It is devotion to the breath of life within yourself that transcends, that we're, of course, all effects of, that transcends us all. Devotion. When I sit in front of my Sri Chakra, it reminds me of my devotion to my gratitude for my body, my gratitude for my gurus and my life, and my devotion to the extraordinary creative process that is the breath of life expressing itself through me. Devotion. So rather than fill your head with lists, I'm going to read you a list in a minute just because I feel obligated to do so. What kind of a program would this be if I didn't read you a list? Maybe, Nataraj, I should let you read the lists. Well, I do need help with that. Lists. We're here to grow devotion. So when I talk about the three-phase respiratory process, and what I was going to tell you was, after Rudy died, and this is yet again another completely unimaginable experience. After Rudy died, I was teaching in our ashram in Dallas, Texas. I used to go down to Dallas and I'd, visit my buddy who was the yoga teacher and the teacher in Rudy's ashram in Dallas, and we'd, do a few classes, and we'd hop in the car and drive across Texas to Port Mansfield and do some fishing for a bit. I was in Texas, and Danny said to me, "There's a guy I think you'd like to meet." And I said, "Okay." And so he made me an appointment with Roland Becker. And Roland Becker was the son of the first student of A.T. Still, who created osteopathy. Arthur Becker, Roland's father, was the first student of A.T. Still, and he was also the first president of the first osteopathic college in the United States. And I met Roland Becker, and he looked at me and said, I walked into his office. Dr. Becker charged $7 an office visit. He was in Snyder Plaza, which is right next to SMU. You walk into his office, and it had 1940s knotty pine paneling with varnish on it, or on the walls. I doubt if any of you are old enough to actually have ever seen such a spectacle. Baby Gwen. And he had linoleum tile over a concrete floor. And a few metal chairs in his office, and he charged $7 an office visit. He didn't have a receptionist, he was his own receptionist. Anyway, Dr. Becker says, "Why are you here?" I said, "I had a friend who sent me." And he said, "Oh," he looked at me for a minute, he said, "I see you had a head injury when you were about 16. And I said, "I did. I fell out of the back of a Jeep and fractured my skull a little bit." He said, "Oh, come on." I walked back in the back with him. He slaps a table. I assumed that meant I get on, so I got on. He put his hands on me, and the end point of it was I felt this bolt of lightning rip through my body and through my head, and I'm laying on the table having a vision of Nityananda. I thought, there's something going on here. Well, I kept visiting Dr. Becker whenever I went to Dallas, and after about 3 years, unusually, Dr. Becker scheduled me as his last patient. Usually I was scheduled in the morning. And he treated me that day, and then I sat up, and usually Becker never took a case. His idea was, why should I bother? First of all, he never took insurance, $7 an office visit. So he's saying, why should I take notes write down something, or even waste any brain space on something which is going to be gone after I've treated it? It's not going to be there anymore, so why should I worry about it? Everything he needed to know about anybody, he knew, putting his hands on them. So Dr. Becker, for the first time, said something to me. Usually said, "Get the hell out of here." You know, he said, "I assume that the reason you keep coming back here is because you want to know what I'm doing." I said, "I do." He reached in his desk, he pulled out a big stack of papers. These were these were notes that Sutherland had made. He hands me this big stack of Sutherland's papers. He hands me a stack of papers that he's done. You know, he says, "Here you go." And he poured me a cup of coffee out of a pot that had been on a burner all day. And he poured it into a styrofoam cup. Much later on, Dr. Becker died of, he died kind of late in life, but he died of kidney failure. And I'm sure that the kidney failure that he died from was caused by the styrofoam, the mix of the acid in the coffee that had sat on the burner all day being, poured into that styrofoam and then dumped in his stomach. I'm sure that the plastic that was stuck in his kidneys caused him no longer to work. But for the next 20 years, I studied with Dr. Becker. I spent time, many all-day walks. We'd go for a walk and get lost, walking 10 steps and stopping to talk for half an hour, and walking another 10 steps, and this would go on all day. We'd forget to eat. This was in high contrast to my experience of Rudy, who maybe said 100 words to me in the entire time I knew him. And we used to go for a walk every morning. He wouldn't say a word, at least to me. If we bumped into Allen Ginsberg, who wanted to go for a walk with us, Rudy would talk with Allen. And a couple times we walked with Abbie Hoffman. None of you guys probably know who that is. He was one of the founders of the Yippie Party and a member of the Chicago 7. You don't know who that is either, do you? Shoot. Okay. The Chicago 7 were prosecuted by the federal government for inciting riots at the 1968 Democratic Convention. It was kind of, the beginning of the political persecution of the anti-Vietnam War movement. So, but Rudy knew everybody, and so literally, I'm not joking, Rudy knew everybody. So, but he never said anything to me. Dr. Becker, in contrast, said lots of stuff to me. And it was from Dr. Becker that I learned about the breath of life as the Kundalini, the breath of life, as the energetic foundation of the physical body. And I came to understand how the physical body, the energetic mechanism, and the goddess are completely one, totally integrated dynamic system, which is constantly reorganizing itself moment by moment to express on a physical level health, on a mental and emotional level wellness, and on the highest level radiance and beauty. This three-phase respiratory mechanism. I mean, first of all, the physical body is a three-phase respiratory mechanism. And then the mind and emotions are a three-phase respiratory mechanism. And the goddess herself is a three-phase respiratory mechanism, and these numbers have been brought into play. They have been fused into the system of practice in Sri Vidya, which is the 9 chakras which compose the body and are the seat of the letters which are the powers of the goddess herself. So the goddess, in her vibrancy, interacting with herself, full of creativity and subtle irregularity, shifts her state and becomes all possible states. All possible states which are established as you and I in the form of the energetic mechanism, which is the 9 chakras and the 8 channels which connect them. The external, readying my list. I'm going to torture you. No, I'm not. The breath of life is the prana in our body, and that is prana kundalini. It expresses itself as the fluctuation in the cerebral spinal fluid, as an energy moving within the cerebral spinal fluid 12 times a minute, 26,000 times a day. In the practice system of the Siddhas, which Muktananda called Siddha Yoga, this fluctuation of within the cerebral spinal fluid 12 times a minute, 26,000 times a day is called ajapa japa, the mantra that repeats itself. The breath of life is the very foundation of our physical existence. And that breath of life is considered to be based in the 3 chakras in our torso that are the sex chakra, the Muladhara chakra, and the sex chakra, the sacral chakra, and the Muladhara chakra. Thanks. Each of those chakras has a goddess that is its ruler. And I'll give you their names now. Trilokya Mohana Chakra, the chakra deceiving the world, the three worlds. That means the illusion, the core chakra is the illusion that we are separate from anything. The fundamental deceiving of Maya is we're separate. Oh my God, I'm here all by myself, and what am I going to do? What is going to happen to me? I know it's getting late, but I'm going to riff for a minute. When we're born, there are two mantras going on inside us from the moment we're born. Those two mantras are Ajapa Japa, the mantra of the breath of life. It is also called the Hamsa mantra. And the other mantra, I've given a name to myself. I call it the mantra of stupidity. That mantra is, and it's going on inside us constantly, that mantra is, what's going to happen to me? Everybody's repeating that mantra. What's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to me? Chanting that mantra, we drive ourselves completely mad. We ourselves torture ourselves. Nobody else tortures us. We torture ourselves. We torture ourselves with the practice of that mantra. What's going to happen to me? Until we come to the point where we say, having practiced that mantra sufficiently, we come to the realization that we are never going to allow ourselves to be hurt ever again. Right? And at that point, we're dead. Maybe your body keeps living, but your heart is closed and locked, and your life is over. Period. When I look at my Shri Chakra, and I think, what do I need? When I think, what do I want? What do I think, I have everything. I have everything. What the hell do I need? I need nothing. I have everything. I have no problem. The goddess has no problem. The goddess, which is the very self of yourself, has no problem. She is perfect beauty. She is beauty without structure. She is symmetry without structure. With structure, she becomes joy. With a lot of structure, with the physical body, she becomes pleasure. We need nothing. So, Trilokya Mohana creates the illusion that we're separate. She instills in us the mantra of stupidity and gets us constantly worrying, what's going to happen to me? And distracted in that place from the simple and wonderful feeling that we always can experience at any moment when we turn our attention to what it feels like to breathe. Breathing, feeling the breathing, we are in the presence of the goddess herself. So, Trilokya Mohana is the enchanter into duality. She is the manifester of the physical world. Her bija is Aim So. She is called Tripura Chakreshvari. She accomplishes the health of the body, the purification of the physical body. She has 28 yoginis, 28. She's surrounded by 28 yoginis, and she agitates the crap out of us, basically, is her job. That's what she does. What's going to happen to me? Tell you what, we're going to have a day-long retreat one of these days. I'm going to do a day-long retreat, and we're all going to chant, what's going to happen to me, all day long. And then at the end of the day, I'm going to turn on the record player and see what happens. The room will be destroyed. In the sacral chakra, Sharva Saparipura chakra, the chakra fulfilling all desires, the sex chakra. You know, her nature is wonder, and she is the fulfiller of all desires. Her bija mantra is Aim Klem Sau. She's called Tripureshwari Chakrashvari. She accomplishes also the further purification of the physical organs. She causes everything to flow. She opens all the channels, and she opens the channels in an outward form. She is the attractor of all of our desires. And here's the cool thing about our desires. If you desire nothing, you know, our desires are the limitation of our imagination. If you desire nothing, you get everything. If you desire something, you get what you want. And then you find out what you want was stupid, and you should never have wanted it. Getting what we want is enormously expensive. She's the 16-petal lotus. The 8-petal lotus is Sharva Shank Sobhana chakra, the agitation of the all. She is the limitless quality of beauty and the capacity to affect events in the world. She is absorbed in the experience of the body herself. She's the Manipura, the abdominal chakra. Her mantra, her bija mantra is Hrim Klim Sau. She is Tripura Sundari Chakeshvari, and she too is involved in the purification of the body. That's because these 3 lower chakras are all about our body. They're about our physical existence. They're about our constitutional strength, our reproductive power, about our ability to endure, you know, about our the creative expression of our material world. She is the agitator of the universe with an emphasis on attracting and connecting everything together. In other words, this goddess is the matrix of interconnectedness that I've been speaking to you about here. It comes up from the core of our body. That seed comes up and starts to sprout, and as it sprouts, it reaches out to the whole world around it. The chakra of 14 triangles, Sarva Sobhagyadaya chakra, is the bestower of all happiness, the heart chakra. There, the 5 senses of perception, the 5 actions, the ego and the mind, the intellect and unconscious, powers to attract and repel all desirable and undesirable spirits. This is another thing I haven't talked about. I don't know if we'll have time. But there's a whole understanding that in Shakta Shaivism that we're not alone in the world. You know, we think we are the supreme species here. We are the top of the food chain. Guess what? We not. We are not the top of the food chain. And so it is the Anahanta chakra, the heart chakra, that protects us from all, predatory powers as it attracts to us and promotes all beneficial powers. And very simply, it is opening your heart and finding that experience of devotion in you that overrides all the bullshit that goes on in your head about what's going to happen to me, and protects you from all the negative spirits and negative energies that mantra attracts. And further, it attracts to you, because of the sweetness in you, it attracts every beneficial spirit to you that connects you with every positive possibility that you could never dream of as a life for yourself, and nourishes and preserves you as you move through this unfolding. Devotion, is your salvation. It is not your weakness. Most people, we'll go out there in the world and you'll meet people who are going to tell you, you're devoted? What kind of that's terrible. You're just a weak-brained person who, can't see the real deal. The reality here is it's all black. It's all dark. We're all alone. Nobody loves us. We're going to be abandoned for sure. That's just the way it is. Right? Let's get real with one another. Devotion is our salvation. And that devotion is ever present in our own heart. And as we connect to it through the good feeling that we experience in our breath, the tensions in our body melt, the negative forces in the form of diseases, in the form of unhappiness and mental and emotional suffering fade away, and slowly we live in a state of unconditional love. Beauty beyond structure. That's pretty cool. Tripuravasini is the goddess that rules the heart chakra. She is the purifier of the senses and the destroyer of the experience of duality. Have you ever really opened your heart to somebody? Have you ever really had that experience where, you merged? You have. Everybody has. It's confusing. The first 432 times it happens, we freak out. It is the heart chakra that is the domain of the fusion of Shiva and Shakti. The next chakra, the chakra of the 10 triangles, is the Savartha Sadhaka chakra, the giving of the accomplishment of all aims. Powers of perfection toward liberation. Associated with purification of the senses and the organs of action. Associated with the expansion of the mantra, it is the throat chakra. Its bija is Hasaim, Hasaklim, Hasau. The goddess is Tripurashri. The prosperity of the profound abundance of three domains, the three cities. The goddess is unimaginable possibility, profound abundance. We're going to give them all these lists, right? Okay, you don't have to write this stuff down, man. We're loaded. We knew you were coming. Really, we did. So we have lists for you. And the thing is, for the most part, I try to spare you the list because now I may be a little bit overly optimistic. People accuse me of exaggerating sometimes. But I always assume that the people who come to study with me are as capable as I am of reading all the lists. And so I just want to hand it to you and you can read it yourself. Why should I waste your time? So, you will have lists. The thing here about, in the next chakra, the Sarva Rakshakara chakra, the giver of all protection, is the third eye chakra. Hrim Klim Blim, palate chakra, Hrim Klim Blim. Tripura Malini, the magical enchantress of the world who gifts us with the ability to speak, and in speaking, to speak to the heart of the matter, or to the heart of the person that we are speaking to. She is the joy of the bliss of fusion with the divine. She unifies the actions of all opposites. She is the vision of non-duality. So, we talked about, okay, I've got to keep going with this tomorrow, I guess, but we talked about the first three chakras as related to the physical body and your individual existence. That is called the Agni Kundalini as well as Prana Kundalini. The fire that is the metabolic fire, the fire of all the processes. The next three chakras, from the heart, the throat, and the palate chakras, these are the Surya chakra, the Surya Kundalini, as well as Chitta Kundalini. Now, the second phase, respiratory mechanism that we are, is the respiratory cognitive process. Our minds are constantly extending themselves into our environment, making contact with their objects, taking something of the object and inhaling that into itself, where it comes to a still point, which is the reorganization. It has taken information in to its depth, however deep you can take it. It shifts itself and it breathes out again and responds to that change and engages all the objects in the field of its experience once more. And this process is constantly going on. It's constantly happening. It's going on "12 times a minute. Actually faster than that, actually. Now they say once every 5, what is the rate? Like every few seconds, our mind goes out and comes back? I've forgotten, I read that recently. And this goes on until, this is interesting, in this system, whereas in other systems, we're supposed to purify our senses and come to that place where we understand consciousness is just absolutely, either it's totally empty and nothing, or it's absolutely still, has no motion, no sense of anything. Everything is gone at that point. That's called Nirvikalpa Samadhi in Vedanta. Nirvikalpa Samadhi doesn't exist in Shakta Shaivism. So, but here, in this system, it is the experience of pleasure, joy, and beauty which dissolves all the structures that of our own mental processes, dissolves all the tensions, in other words, that keeps our mind extending itself out into the world, asking over and over again, as it encounters its objects, what's going to happen to me? What's the angle here? What's really going on? What's going to happen to me? So this cognitive process, which is a respiratory process, is going on constantly. It is manifest in the three chakras, the heart, the throat, and the palate, right at the junction of the heart and soft palate and the roof of your mouth. And you know, some systems of practice in Shakta Shaivism have, as part of the meditative process, that you close your tongue, you put your tongue right on that spot, and you hold it there, and they say that closes the circuit and allows the energy to go up. That somehow suggests that the energy is controlled by the physical body, and in fact that the situation is the opposite. The energy controls the physical body. The physical body has almost no ability to impact the energy, except it can get completely, stagnant, and all flow is obstructed, but then we're going to die soon anyway. So, and then the final section of chakras is the 8 triangles. Sarva Rogahara chakra, the destroyer of all diseases. The third eye chakra, Hrim Shrim Sao. All diseases arise from differentiated thought. The Sarva Siddhi Pradaya chakra, the giver of all powers, is the crown chakra. Hashrim, Hashrau, Tripurambika. She is the fulfillment of the journey of Kundalini to reside in the Sahasrara chakra. She is the Tripura Ambika, the mother, the mistress of the 3 cities. She is the person who generates will, knowledge, and action. She is her attendants are the very secret yoginis, 3 in total: Kameshwari, the power of will; Vajeshwari, the power of knowledge; and Bhagyamalini, the power of action. Her mudra is Sarva Bija Mudra. She is the seed. And finally, Sarva Anandamaya chakra, the chakra whose nature is all bliss. She is Dvadhisthana, 12 fingers above the head. She is the Vidya mantra, which I'll give tomorrow. Mahatripura, and she is Mahatripura Sundari. She is also Paraparatira Rahasya Yogini, and she is also Mudra Shakti. That's my list for now. These 3 goddesses, the goddesses from the third eye to Dvadhisthana, which is 12 finger breadths above the head, represent that dimension of ourselves which is totally interconnected with the whole of livingness. And it is from this part of ourselves that we transcend our individuality and experience not just our total union with life on earth, but, we experience ourselves as the very essence of, the universe, the solar system, the universe, the constellations, the nakshatras, the planets, the junction points of the planets, all become, a function of our own individual existence. At this point, we are a cosmic being. So I've kept you a long time today, I'm sorry. Sort of. No, I mean it, I really am. I didn't intend to talk this long. And I wanted to say that tonight we will do Havan. Now, you might ask, why are we doing Havan? And I could simply say, because I want to. But Havans are a part of my practice. And these offerings into fire are considered very, very primary to any tantric sadhana. And that is because while the goddess herself only receives mantras as offerings, her 101 ganas, as in Ganapati, or Gana in this case meaning protectors, or the 101 powers that are her retinue, they receive, because they are, energy fields. They are their own vortexes moving in the space of the supreme vortex, which is the breath of life, the goddess herself. These 101 ganas, they receive material offerings. And so I do this puja constantly to pacify all the negative energies in all of the environment that I am moving through. In this case, all of your environments I am moving through. I do it to pacify all negative energies and to, provoke and invite and install, in some cases, every kind of positive energy in the people who are present and in my general environment. I do a pretty elaborate Havan, but most of the time. It doesn't have to be as elaborate as I do it. It can be unbelievably simple. But we will have, this is not special. It's my regular practice on Friday nights. And for those of you who are on my Facebook page, you've seen me do it, I post way too many pictures of me doing Havans. Well, the truth is I'm a boring person. I think I do two things. I do three things. I meet my friends, I teach, I do Havans, and I work out. That's it. I don't do anything else. I can barely even read a book anymore. So we will do a Havan. We'll be in the tent at 7 o'clock, and I hope that it will be a beautiful experience for you. It will be for me for sure, and I'm happy. I'm glad we'll be sharing it. And at some point, if you get really serious about this practice and you want to sustain it, and I'll be doing a workshop on how to do a Havan. So, thanks for hanging out with me this morning. I started out, this teaching started out as I was asked by a woman who's Italian to do a program for 20 of her friends that she was going to bring from Italy. And so I said, okay. And then I hooked her up with Moni to talk about and Ruth to talk about the logistics of it all. And so the end point of it is nobody is here from Italy, and here you guys are. So I had intended it to be a lot more relaxed than it turned out to be, for me. But I'm doing this, Havan, and I hope you will appreciate our shared experience there. Then tomorrow night we'll do again what we did last night. We'll have class. Namaste to you all.